Well, hello everyone. Welcome to the recording for week 6. You can see week 6 is May 6 through 12. And before I go into that, just to remind some reminders, we have week 6, 7, 8, and 9. So we have 4 weeks left. If you're behind, you really need to get going. I suggest you go take a look at the passing plan I have set up. The passing plan will show you what work you need to do in order to at least get to 60% so you can pass the class. So please get busy. Right now, if you're not at least 50% for the whole class now, then that means you are really, really behind. If you're in the 20 or 30%, so please get busy on your work. Okay, week 6. I'll open that. You can see that week 6, we're moving into section 3 of the course, the unit 3. And in section 3, we're going to look at DAW software, different types of audio tools, multi-track projects. You're going to start a project right here in lesson 3, and it's not a project like you would submit a class project or an English project or something. They just call it a project because you're working on it a number of times. And then you'll work on it later on towards the end in the 3B activity, then you will submit it. So I have this broken down into like I normally do, the Tuesday and the Thursday. You can do it however you want. Thursday you're doing more work with Audacity. And then of course each section of the course, each unit has the study questions you'll complete, and you'll use the quiz study guide and the quiz preview before you do the quiz. And of course you have the assignment 3A and assignment 3B. So very similar setup to all of the units for this course. I'm going to go on down to section 3. And section 3 again is about audio hardware and software. So audio software tools is the main thing, but this is going to talk about hardware a little bit. Now, before we get into this, of course, I'll look at the Class Connect write-up. In lesson 1, give an example of how DAW software can be useful if you don't have a certain instrument for recording. There's 2 similarities between Audacity and DAW programs. So in this section, in section 1 unit, we learn about DAW software and hardware, computer requirements and software licenses. We're going to learn about MIDI and looping software. All of you have probably used MIDI before, but you didn't know it. Look at syncing and editing tracks, learn about codecs, etc. So lots of stuff going on. So as we get into this, you'll see that the first lesson is all about DAW software. DAW software, it's digital audio workstation. So that's really the software that's used to edit sound. And it can do a wide variety of tasks and abilities. DAW can sync audio and video, so you can play video and sync the audio with it, like if you're making a movie or something like that. So you watch a movie when someone speaks, their mouth will align with the words that you hear. It works with lots of audio interfaces, and it can include virtual instruments. So that's kind of cool, isn't it? So if you didn't have a pianist, you could simulate a piano track or a guitar track or a drum track. So those things are kind of nice with real high-level DAW software. So you can see all about what DAW is used for. So a little practice activity, see what you know. Computer requirements. I'm not going to go through all these, but you want to take a look at it. DAW software, there's minimum computer requirements, meaning the lowest level of computers you need. So you need a higher level of computers for lots of DAW software. That's one reason we use Audacity, because it doesn't need a high-level computer. So it's going to talk about the basic hardware you would need, the operating system you would need, the hard disk space, all of that. So go through all of these so you'll be able to do well when you do the quiz later on. You can see all the different components that it talks about. recommended hardware. So they recommend you have dual monitors, so 2 screens, you have USB and they use FireWire. So you read up on each of those things. I'm not going to take the time to show you all of those. You can do that yourself. So some practice, see what you can get correct here. So you're just going to do a drag and drop on each of those. Then there's different or specific hardware for the DAW. So there's the audio interfaces, which are the cables and such. Then there are the controllers, which is the hardware you use, and then the accelerator cards, which are part of your computer. So take a look at each of these things to see what part they play in a DAW setup if you're using DAW software. Some popular, so here's some of the popular DAW tools. Of course, these are for a fee. They cost you money, probably. But that's another reason we use Audacity, because it's free. So Audacity, some advantages. So it's not DAW software, and it cannot sync audio and video. And it can't be used with controllers. It can't synthesize instruments. But it does do a number of things. You don't need special equipment for Audacity. It doesn't require additional hardware. It doesn't use much of your computer resources, and most computers that have been around for 5 years can use Audacity. And it's open source, meaning that you're free to use it to share with other people and things like that. Some features of Audacity, I mean, look at all it can do. Just like DAW can do. Audacity can record from a microphone. You can record your audio. You can use Audacity, can do editing, just like DAW can do editing. Audacity can do playback of single or multiple track audio. And you can do sound effects with Audacity, just like you can with DAW. So it does a lot of the techniques that DAW software would do. So that's why it's good to learn with something like Audacity. This talks about licensing, software licenses, proprietary software, open source, and free. So go through those so you have a general understanding of different software strategies, different types of software out there. Audacity is licensed. It's not proprietary. It's open source. So meaning that you can share Audacity with other people. And it has a general public license. So they're going to have you read that public license just to see what a software license is like. So in this lesson, learn about DAW, about computer requirements, a little bit about Pro Tools and Logic Studio, learn about advantages of Audacity, etc. So now we're going into lesson 2. Let's go back to the write-up. So an example of how DAW can be useful if you don't have certain instruments. I talked about that. 2 similarities between Audacity and DAW. I talked about that. So lesson 2, example of a MIDI controller that many of you may have used. Example of how looping can be used in a song. So now we're going to get into other audio tools. The main one they talk about is MIDI. And MIDI is communications between a musical instrument, electronic instrument, audio hardware, and software. You can see what MIDI stands for, Music Instrument Digital Interface. And what MIDI allows you to do is to take the keyboard, you see the keyboard down here, and then connect it to all these other devices. So MIDI has the certain cables and connections and things that allow you to do that. And what MIDI does, it converts the digital sound into a command, a computerized command, and that needs to be translated. So MIDI, it's not MIDI sound, it's really MIDI is the way that the sounds are made. So the history of MIDI, you can see it's been around for a long time. In the 1980s, there was musical instrument technology companies, and before MIDI, then you had to do, things weren't compatible. Different companies made electronic synthesizers and musical instruments, but they weren't compatible with one another, nor were they compatible with the DAW hardware and those types of things. So MIDI technology, even though it's old, it ends up being a common standard. So then different technology companies and musical instrument companies, computer companies, they can all work together since they go off the MIDI standard. So figure out or see if you can answer some of the practice questions about MIDI. MIDI cable, you have to have a certain cable for MIDI, and some computers will have these. You can look on your computer on the back of your TV, you might have MIDI connection. It's a 5-connection, 5-con plug, U shape. And MIDI jacks, those are how the music goes from one device to another. So you have your input jack, your output jack, and your through jack, and you read what each of those mean. The through jack, this talks about here, passes through an exact copy of what you've created. So that would be used if you're dubbing from one device to another or something like that. So MIDI devices have many different uses. Channel voice messages, there's a digital signal sent between MIDI, so that's the way MIDIs connect. And once you go through this, look at these things are interactive, so if I click on this, I can hear the sound. And you see that the guitar and the MIDI device can be connected. So practice this a little bit. Answer the practice questions. MIDI controllers, that's electronic equipment, the audio equipment that you actually use to send, receive, process, things like that. They don't make the sound, they process the sound. So you can hear the different things there. Another thing about MIDI controllers, sometimes they're in the shape of instruments such as keyboards, drums, wind instruments, like clarinets and flutes and things like that. Now, the thing about MIDI devices, some of you have probably used them, but you might not know it. So think of a device that maybe you've used that adds music to something, or transfers music. Now check it out here, popular music game, Guitar Hero, Rock Band, they use MIDI signals. So when you're plugged in with those, with Guitar Hero, that's using MIDI signals from the guitar that you use. And those are MIDI controllers. So you've actually used a MIDI device. MIDI is used by many cell phones for playing the musical ringtones. So you can see the great uses of MIDI software. Now, looping software, of course, we learned before that looping is a sound that continues to play and play and play. You can find looping software if you use GarageBand. There's looping with GarageBand, so it plays over and over. And those can be important because you can compose music that way. So in using looping software, if I click this, I can hear that drum just keep playing right the same track all the time. So I can take that looping drum track and put it in align it with some guitar sounds and different things like that, so I can play this in the background and then record my guitar if I wanted to. So you see that they say right here, if you don't have any drums, you can find a drum sample and use it as a looping sample within what you're trying to create. So finding loops to use, you can search on Google. This talks about finding some of the MIDI things. There's also a website called ccmixer.org. The musicians let you download their music. You can use their music. So practice, see if you can answer that question properly. So in summary, we learned about MIDI in this lesson, channel voice messages in MIDI, and also learned about looping. So now we're getting into lesson 3. Let's go back to the ClassConnect write-up. In the ClassConnect write-up, example of MIDI controller that many of you may have used. We talked about that. Example of how looping can be used in a song. Talked about that. Okay, lesson 3. Why is it important to sync audio loops? What does a metronome help musicians do? So here we are in lesson 3. We're going to talk about multiple music projects. This is where you're going to start doing a little bit of work with Audacity in this project. So let's have you go through and open an Audacity file. So open up Audacity, and then you go into your resource folder, so your audio folder, your section 3 folder. Hopefully your computer is set up similar to this. And you're going to find the sync AUP file, syncing AUP file. So you open that file, then we're going to have you do some work with that. So just as you've done previously, you're going to start practicing what they show you. So this is all about syncing. So syncing lines up different tracks of audio so they sound good together. So it talks about right here, if they're out of sync, the loops will sound messy when you play them together. So when they're going to have you download this syncing on the last screen, they have you download that, and it's not going to sound very good. It's not synced. Now they're going to have you go through and do these steps to sync audio. So just like you've done before, you'll go through this. You can read these steps. You can also click on them to see what you're supposed to do. Like this one, you would choose the time shift tool. In the next step, it tells you how you're going to time shift and move this a little bit. So go through these steps as you work through it, and in the end they have you save it. So save it the right way. Do everything they tell you to do there. Now you're going to use a little bit of tempo. This is a metronome. The metronome is used to keep tempo with music. Keeps different speeds. Now we can take this slider, I slide it along and see how it puts the weight towards the end of the metronome so it goes slower. If I pull it this way, a little bit of physics involved here. Move it this way, it's down near the bottom, so then it goes faster. So I can adjust that metronome. And again, metronome is used to keep pace with music. Now they're going to have you go through and do some practice with changing tempo, pace, and different things like that. So they're telling you about what changing tempo does, fast tempo, slow tempo, and they give you a screenshot of what it looks like. You're going to work on things called beats per minute. Now they actually have you go in and change the tempo of the sync file that you still have open. So again, you'll go down through these steps, and you're going to open up another file. You have the sync one open, but now you're going to import another audio file into where you have the sync file. So you're going to import the file called tempo wave, and you're going to combine that as you do the syncing activity. Now you're going to have you work through changing pitch. Of course, we learned before that pitch is the frequency of an audio track. They're going to have you work through that, same thing as before. They give you a screenshot of what it looks like. Now they're going to give you the directions on going through and doing that work. So make sure you do it properly, follow all those directions. Speed command. So you change the speed of the music a little bit. And they're going to have you work through a couple of ways. And you can see that you can also change it to like the speed of record players. In the old days, those of you who are familiar with record players, you can kind of relate to that a little bit. So you're going to change the track speed, follow all of those directions so it works properly. Save the project, so as they say down here. So this one you're going to save project as. Save project as. It's going to be a little bit different. Again, save it as the word multi-track. You can see it's going to be an Audacity project. And now you know how to do that. So get that saved properly. Check your work, listen to it, make sure that the tempo sounds good, the pitch is good, all of that, make sure everything is good. And you finish with that lesson. So lesson 3 is finished. We looked at syncing audio tracks, changing tempo, speed, sound, etc. So now we're into 4, but let's go back to the write-up. And from 3, why is it important to sync audio loops? We talked about that. What does a metronome help musicians do? Talked about that. What's the goal of audio codec? How is audio file compression different from other file compression? Let's look at that. Okay, lesson 4. Lesson 4 to look at different audio file formats. Many are familiar to you. MP3, WAV file, Audacity file, etc. And they have advantages and disadvantages for one another. Some have high quality but use up too much disk space, so have lower quality, but use up less disk space. So different types of files. In the audio codec, it's a program which saves a signal file as a specific type. So if I create Audacity, I would have to use a codec to translate it into a WAV file if I wanted people to hear it properly. So the codec, it's a decoder. So it decodes what you have recorded and puts it in the proper format that you want. It also compresses, so it can make it smaller. And of course that depends on the type of file that you use. But the main goal of audio codec is to make an audio file as small as possible by making sure the sound is still good. So it does a good mix of those things. So that's the main goal of audio codec. That's right there. So uncompressed audio files. So there's some that are uncompressed, which means obviously they're going to be huge files. Like this says, a minute of sound is 10 megabytes on a hard disk. But they're not compressed. So you can read a little bit about each of these types of sound. I'm just skipping through them. You can look at those on your own. Now we get into compression. And compression, of course, what it does is it removes the sounds that we really can't hear. So then it ends up making the file smaller. So this way the audio files take up less space and the sound is almost exactly like it was. Now some devices cannot play back the sounds unless they uncompress them. So that's something you need to think about. You have some data loss, slightly, not a huge deal if you're using proper compression software and good compression software. It's not going to be that huge of a deal. Lossless audio compression. So this is exact copy, and it's still large. So again, the less loss you have, the larger the file size. So this is going to talk about different lossless audio compression technologies. A couple of different formats there. Apple has one. Then there's the free lossless audio codec. So there's some ways that you can do that so you don't have losses. Lossy audio compression. So this type of compression makes it so you're not going to really notice any huge difference. Now that would compress it, and then that would be, of course, compressed ones are better for streaming. So streaming is when you download and it plays back as it's downloading, like internet radio is live audio streaming. So that's a certain type of compressed file, but it does not lose much of the quality. So you can see all the different formats here. I'm just going to skip down towards the end. But go through those because you'll see a couple that can really help you do streaming audio best. So practice this, see how many of these you can get correct. So we learned about uncompressed audio formats, and about lossless and lossy audio encoding formats. Okay, lesson 5, so I'm going to go back to the Class Connect write-up. And on number 4 we had what is goal of audio codec. I showed you that. How is audio file compression different from compressing other files? Remember, as you read that, with audio file compression, you don't have to uncompress it generally. You don't have to physically. Your device might uncompress it. But for other file types like Word documents or PowerPoint or Excel, if you compress those, for the person to watch your PowerPoint on the other end, they have to uncompress or unzip. So audio files, once they're compressed, you can just listen to the file. If you want to make a recording of your voice so others can stream it over the internet, what are the two best formats to use? Explain the relationship between audio file size and bit rate. So lesson 5, encoding audio. So this is to make your audio files in different formats. As we look at this, so they're going to have you open a file. So you'll go through the process. By now you should know how to open a file. This one you're going to open up a file called multitrack AUP. So it's an Audacity project file. So you'll open that. And then they talk about the encoding. So MP3, of course, you're familiar with, MP3 players. And when you have different types of audio uses, you need to decide how you're going to compress it or what format you want it to be in. If you look right here, if you're going to stream over the internet, then you're going to use Real Audio or WMA files. Those are the best streaming over the internet. If you're going to have just somebody listen to it as they want, you can use a WAV file. So for live streaming over the internet, Real Audio or WMA would be the way that you'd want to have those files. Practice, so see if you can answer that question. Encoding audio. Well, as you encode it, then audio has certain bit rates, and bit rate is how much information is encoded every second or so. You can see here, the higher the bit rate, the larger the file. So if you have a 32 bit rate, that's going to be a larger file than a 16 bit rate. So you can read down here the bit rates for different types of devices. But essentially, what we want to keep in mind is that the higher the bit rate, the larger the file will be. Metadata is information about a song inside the audio itself, so you can see that. And it's information about the audio data, about how it was recorded, the artist's name, and those types of things. Many audio formats allow you to add this metadata, so people will know about about the song, about the music. They're going to have you here, and now you're going to export. So far, all we've worked with is AUP Audacity files. Now they're going to have you export a file into a WAV format. So follow these directions to export the file they want you to do. So you're going to do all those steps that they have. Now you also need encoders to run run files. And the encoder would then take that file and help convert it into something that people can listen to on different devices. So you're going to have you have a lame MP3 encoder, which then it would take that Audacity file and then make it so it can be listened to on MP3 devices. So you're encoding it as MP3. So they're going to have you install the lame encoder. So follow these directions to install the lame encoder into your Audacity program. Then you're going to add lame to the Audacity, so follow these steps, please. And once you have those things that the lame encoder done, then you can export as an MP3. So you'll see what you're doing here. Before you could export in Audacity, you export it as a WAV, or with a WAV file, but now you're going to export into a different format using that lame converter. Just follow those steps, just like always. And there are some plugins that can be used for different audio formats. So just give you a little bit of extra information. So you're going to install this library. So follow these directions, just like you've been doing in this class. So you're going to add the library to the Audacity, sort of how you added that lame encoder to Audacity. Then you're going to export a file as an AAC file. So they're just giving you practice on exporting a number of ways, just to see that there's not only one way to do it. You're going to export as an FLAC file. And they have you do this so you can go in and compare the file sizes. So you go to your C drive, and you'll go look if you've saved them all the correct way, and you can go see the size of all these files. See the difference in the file sizes? Huge difference. The MP3 is so much different from a WAV file, isn't it? Size-wise. That's really important. So check your work, make sure you have everything in the right folders, the proper names and all of that. So that's all of this lesson. So we added lame, FF, library, etc. And of course, as always, we have the career connection, so that's part of the write-up. So understand, go look at a little bit of information about the career. Let's go back to the write-up, and we answered the questions from lesson 5. Make a voice recording. What are the 2 best audio formats to stream it over the internet? Relationship between audio size and bitrate, we talked about that. And the career connection, you can answer that. So there's the write-up. So now, for these assignments, of course, you know what the assignment 3A are the written questions and such. But 3B is going to be where you're going to do the work. Just to show you this, you've done a lot of the work already, but like they do in all these sections in these lessons, they're going to have you check your work from what you did in section 3 as we went through that recording. So make sure all these things are done properly. So you've done all that work. And you're going to add to that file, you're going to open up that multi-track that you messed with and save it as multi-track effects, and you're going to add one of the tracks and add an echo to it. We've added an echo a couple of units ago, the last unit I think. Then they have you still working with that, add reverb to it. Remember we used echo and reverb in the last unit. So you're working with that same file, multi-track effects, then they're going to have you save it. We're going to have you encode it as MP3, add the metadata to it. We looked at metadata earlier in this unit. Make sure your multi-track effects project has all 5 of these tracks that you've worked on as you've gone through it. And you've added the echo and the reverb. You've encoded it as MP3. You're going to go through and save it all. Zip, so you're going to zip your folder. And you're going to submit it. So when you zip it up, you're going to have in your zipped assignment 3 folder, you're going to have all of these in there, the things that you've worked on. So when I unzip that folder, that assignment 3 folder, I should see all 5 of those files in there with those names. So that's what you have on this. So all the work you've done is you watch the presentation, and then you're adding the reverb and the echo, and then doing an export into a different file format. So that's what you're doing the work for this. So I look forward to your work coming in. I look forward to the Class Connect write-up, your study questions, the assignment 3 questions, and then finally the assignment 3B work that you'll submit. So thanks everybody. Again, if you're behind, you really need to get going, get weeks 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 going before you jump into week 6. Get those grades raised. Thanks everyone. Bye.